Nobody writes about the ones who survive. History remembers the failures, the foreclosures, the farms that became subdivisions. But the stories that don't fit the narrative, the ones that quietly endure, those get forgotten. This is one of those stories. In rural Oklahoma, there's a barn that doesn't appear in any agricultural history books, a cooperative that economists never studied, a model of survival that worked for 7 decades while the world looked the other way. 10 families. An impossible idea. 70 years of being ignored by everyone except each other. If you search for the Red Valley Cooperative in academic journals, you'll find nothing. No case studies, no research papers, no business school analyses. It's as if it never existed. But if you drive through that part of Oklahoma and stop at the local diner, mention the cooperative, and watch the faces around you change, they know, they remember. They just never thought anyone else would care. The story begins in 1956, but not the way you'd expect. It doesn't begin with vision or planning. It begins with a secret. 10 families, all hiding the same truth from each other. They were failing, separately, silently, too proud to admit they couldn't make it alone. The drought had been going on for months. The wheat was dying, the cattle were thin, the bank payments were coming due. And every family in that corner of Oklahoma was pretending everything was fine. James Turner walked his fields every evening and told himself tomorrow would be better. Thomas Johnson looked at his pregnant wife and 4 children and wondered how he would feed them through winter. Sarah Merritt stared at her dying orchard and refused to believe it was over. They were all lying to themselves and to each other. What finally broke the silence wasn't courage. It was exhaustion. Margaret Turner, James's wife, couldn't pretend anymore. She picked up the phone and called her neighbor, not to ask for help, just to tell the truth. "We're not going to make it," she said. The silence on the other end lasted so long. Margaret thought the line had gone dead. Then, "Neither are we." That conversation started something that would last 70 years. Within a week, 10 families knew they were all facing the same ending. Within a month, they had made a decision that seemed impossible. They would combine everything, share everything, survive together or fail together. They called it the Red Valley Cooperative. They drew up legal papers that made them co-owners of 3,200 acres. Equal shares, equal risk, equal commitment. And then they waited for someone to notice, for agricultural experts to study what they were doing, for economists to analyze their model, for historians to document their experiment. Nobody came, nobody cared. They were too small to matter, too rural to be relevant, too unconventional to fit into existing categories. So they survived in obscurity. The first year was chaos. 10 different ways of farming, 10 different opinions about everything. Arguments erupted constantly. Trust was fragile. But the drought didn't care about their disagreements. The bank didn't care about their process. They either figured it out or they lost everything. They divided the land by what each section did best. Eastern fields for wheat, western pastures for cattle, northern acres for orchards, southern sections for vegetables. Each family contributed what they knew. Each person covered what others didn't. The summer of 1956 almost destroyed them. The harvest was terrible. They barely broke even, but they survived. And when the drought finally broke in 1957, when the rain came back and the crops grew again, they faced a question. Should they dissolve the cooperative and return to individual farming? They voted unanimously they would stay together. Not because it was easy, because it worked. The children who grew up in the cooperative didn't know they were part of something unusual. To them, cooperation was normal. Robert Turner's son worked alongside Thomas Johnson's son like they were brothers. Susan Henderson and Linda Merritt learned farming together. The boundaries between families blurred until they barely existed. But outside the cooperative, nobody was paying attention. The agricultural revolution of the 1960s focused on industrial farming, corporate consolidation, economies of scale. A small cooperative in rural Oklahoma didn't fit the narrative, so it got ignored. When James Turner died in 1963, there was no newspaper obituary beyond the local paper. No agricultural journal mentioned the loss of a cooperative founder. He was buried by 10 families who understood what he had built, and that was enough. The cooperative created a council system. 7 elected members, 3-year terms, democratic decisions. No single voice could dominate. It was messy and slow, but it was fair, and it worked. Through the 1960s and 70s, they watched neighbors sell out to corporations, watched family farms become parking lots, watched a way of life disappear across rural America. The cooperative survived because of diversification. When wheat prices crashed, cattle prices held. When cattle markets tanked, orchards carried them through. They were never dependent on one thing. The second generation took over in the 1970s. They brought new ideas: organic farming, sustainable agriculture, direct-to-consumer sales. But still, nobody outside their community paid attention. No agricultural publications wrote about their success. No business schools studied their model. They were invisible, and that invisibility became a kind of protection. In 1972, they faced a crisis. Jennifer Turner wanted to go to law school. She wanted a life beyond farming. If the children left, who would continue the work? The solution they found was revolutionary, but nobody outside the cooperative knew about it. They would pay for education, support their children's dreams, require 5 years of work after graduation, then give them the freedom to choose. Jennifer went to law school. She came back. She stayed. Not because she was forced to, but because she saw value in what her grandfather had built. The 1980s farm crisis destroyed thousands of operations across America. Banks foreclosed. Farmers lost everything. Suicide rates spiked. The Red Valley Cooperative survived because they carried minimal debt. They had grown slowly, carefully, without the leverage that crushed other farms. 3 neighboring farms joined the cooperative during those years. Families who had mocked the idea of cooperation in good times came begging for help in bad times. By 1990, the cooperative included 13 families and over 4,000 acres. Still, no one was documenting this. No researchers were studying how they had survived when so many others failed. The cooperative existed in a blind spot of American agricultural history. The 3rd generation brought computers and the internet. Marcus Turner, Jennifer's son, saw possibilities his grandparents never imagined: online markets, organic certification, direct restaurant sales, premium pricing for food with a story. In 1995, he proposed converting to organic farming. 3 years of transition, 3 years of lower yields, 3 years of sacrifice. The older generation resisted, but the vote passed, 8-5. Those 3 years were hard. Profits shrank. Some members grumbled, but Marcus and his generation worked harder than ever, learning new techniques, building new relationships, creating a brand around the Red Valley story. In 1998, they received organic certification. Within 2 years, profits had doubled. Within 5 years, they were selling directly to restaurants in Oklahoma City and Tulsa at prices conventional farms couldn't match. The cooperative had evolved again, and still nobody was writing about it. The turn of the millennium brought new members, young people from outside the original families who believed in cooperation. They brought skills the founders never had: marketing, web design, business management. The cooperative wasn't just a family anymore, it was an idea. But success brought tension. In 2005, a proposal to partner with a large food corporation split the council. The debate raged for months. Families stopped speaking to each other. Sarah Johnson, Thomas's granddaughter, ended the crisis by reading from her grandfather's 1956 journal, his account of that first desperate meeting: the fear, the doubt, the hope. They stayed together because divided, they would lose everything, she said. That's still true. They voted against corporate partnerships. They would stay independent, even if it meant staying small, even if it meant staying invisible. The 2008 financial crisis tested everything. Credit markets froze, commodity prices crashed, the cooperative lost money, but they didn't lose the land. They didn't lose each other. By 2010, they had stabilized again. The fourth generation was taking leadership. Great-grandchildren of James Turner and Thomas Johnson worked the same fields their ancestors had nearly lost in 1956. In 2015, they celebrated 60 years. Over 200 people gathered in the barn where it all began. No press coverage, no documentary crews, no academic observers, just the people who had lived this story and the children who would carry it forward. Today, the Red Valley Cooperative operates over 4,500 acres of certified organic farmland, 32 full-time workers, 17 families supported, direct sales to consumers through farmers markets, restaurants and online, farm tours and educational programs. It's been successful by any measure, profitable, sustainable, resilient. It has outlived the drought that created it. It has outlived the farm crisis. It has outlived every challenge, and it's still largely unknown. There are reasons for this. The cooperative never sought publicity. They never hired PR firms or courted media attention. They were too busy surviving to worry about being recognized. But there's something else. Stories like this don't fit the dominant narratives about American agriculture. The story we tell is about industrialization, consolidation, the death of small farms. A story about cooperation and survival doesn't fit that framework, so it gets ignored. Which raises a question. How many other stories like this exist? How many quiet successes are happening in rural America while we write obituaries for family farming? How many models of cooperation and resilience are working while we assume nothing can work? The Red Valley Cooperative suggests something uncomfortable, that maybe we've been looking at agricultural history through the wrong lens, that maybe survival looks different than we thought, that maybe the stories we ignore are the ones we need most. A few years ago, a graduate student from Oklahoma State University stumbled onto the cooperative while researching something else. She spent 6 months documenting their history, interviewing members, studying their model. She wrote a dissertation about it. It got filed away in a university library. A handful of people read it. The cooperative continued on, unchanged, because that's what forgotten things do. They continue, they endure, they exist, whether anyone is paying attention or not. The children of the cooperative learn lessons that aren't taught in business schools. That cooperation isn't weakness, that independence isn't always strength, that success isn't about individual achievement, it's about collective resilience. They learn these lessons not from textbooks, but from watching their parents and grandparents work together, from seeing how the cooperative handles disagreements, from understanding that their success is tied to their neighbor's success. These lessons won't appear in agricultural journals. They won't be featured in case studies. They'll just be passed down, generation to generation, in a barn in rural Oklahoma that most people will never hear about. Margaret Turner died in 1989. Before she died, someone asked her if she was disappointed that the cooperative never got recognition, that all their hard work remained invisible. She looked confused by the question. Recognition from who? She asked. Everyone who matters already knows. That might be the most important lesson of all, that the value of something isn't determined by who notices it, that success can be quiet, that significance can be local, that making a difference in 10 families' lives across 7 decades matters more than appearing in history books. The Red Valley Cooperative will probably never be famous. It will probably remain a footnote, if that, in American agricultural history. Future historians might never know it existed, but it does exist. It has existed for 70 years. It will probably exist for 70 more, and maybe that's the real story. Not that it was forgotten, but that it never needed to be remembered to matter. If you drive through Red Valley today, you won't see historical markers. You won't see tourist attractions. You'll see farmland, wheat fields, cattle pastures, orchards. Families working together in ways that look unremarkable, unless you know what you're looking at. The barn where it all began still stands. Inside, there's a plaque listing 10 names and a date. June 1956. No explanation, no context, just names and a date that mean everything to some people and nothing to most. That's how forgotten things survive, quietly, persistently, without need for validation or recognition. The soil doesn't care if anyone remembers, it just keeps growing what gets planted. The cooperative doesn't care if anyone notices, it just keeps doing what works. And 70 years after 10 families made an impossible decision, that's still enough.